Hi, this is Jeff from Four Muddy Paws, and welcome to our second installment of In the Kitchen With. And today I have Rich from Champion Pet Foods, and we're going to be talking a lot about what makes Champion Pet Foods different. Orijen and Acana, what is it that drives them to create the food that they do, and what foods might be right for your pet. So we're going to get started. So Rich, thank you for coming in tonight.
That's my pleasure.
Appreciate that. And can you tell us a little bit about who Champion Pet Foods are and kind of how the company got started?
Sure. So Champion Pet Foods was founded by Reinhold Molenfeld. We started out as a feed company up in Alberta, Canada, supplying feed to local farmers and ranchers. In the 80s, we got into private label, so we started making pet food. But we made it for a lot of brands that you wouldn't necessarily associate with Champion Pet Foods as you know it today. But that's really where we learned how to make pet food. After doing that for a number of years, we created our first brand, the Acana brand, in 1990. And that original Acana food shared the same quality factors that we look for in our foods today. It was high meat inclusion food that could be fed to any dogs that were looking for a species appropriate ancestral diet, wolf diet, but as we know it today, we call it a biologically appropriate diet.
Yeah. Great. So you've been doing this for the high meat inclusion for quite a long time.
Yeah, I guess it would be about 28 years. Yeah.
It's great. So you've just recently created a brand new kitchen.
Yeah.
The Dog Star Kitchens in Kentucky. And prior
Correct.
to that, you were always manufacturing your foods in Canada.
Yep.
And there is a perception out there that the quality, one of the hallmarks of your brand was that it was made in Canada, and it came down, and then you decided to build this new plant in Kentucky. So can you tell us a little bit about how that decision came about, and what makes that Dog Star Kitchen state of the art?
Yeah. So we were growing and got to a point where we had outgrown the capacity of our North Star Kitchen, so we need to address that. But we also needed to address our mission, which is to make biologically appropriate foods with fresh regional ingredients and to never outsource, so to do it in-house. So we needed a new kitchen. Champion has always been a pretty global company. Our actually first bag of food was not even sold in Canada. It was sold in the Czech Republic. We're in over 80 countries as we sit here today. So we have always looked at the market with a global lens.
Right. And most of those global foods are coming out of that Canadian.
Now it's a mix. Yeah.
So yes, it was, I guess.
Yeah. Originally,
World Kitchen. So okay.
Absolutely. So we had a lot of different countries that we were sold in. All of them had different regulations and rules. So what we decided to do is just adopt the highest standards for all of our foods, and we call that the Champion standard. So while at retail, maybe it was shorthanded that it was a Canadian thing, it was not anything that was regulated to us by being Canadian or making food in Canada. Actually, in Canada, they don't even have an AFCO. If you are making food in Canada to sell to Canadians, you don't have any AFCO regulations that you are required to follow, you are suggested to follow. So the analogy I like to think, because you mentioned aptly that it's a kitchen, it's if you go to a restaurant and you love this restaurant, it's a chef-driven restaurant, and the chef opens a new restaurant, you can't wait to try his new restaurant. Yeah. And it's the same thing with us when we moved to the United States. The quality didn't change. What we look for in ingredients didn't change. We still look for regional ingredients. Why we chose Kentucky is because of those fresh regional ingredients, the proximity to them. It's a very fertile agricultural area. It's not a big state. It's mid-30s as far as landmass, but it's number 3 in small to mid-sized farms. So we can get so many good ingredients delivered to us fresh. And for us, fresh means that the only source of preservation is refrigeration. So we need to be pretty close to that ingredient to get it to our kitchen and make food in a timely fashion so it's still fresh. Yeah.
Great. So how many miles do you think, like roughly or approximately, what's your distance?
Well, I know that we get, so like we get all of our saltwater fish comes from the Atlantic. Okay. So we have Norpel Fisheries as our regional supplier of saltwater fish. So that is delivered from there. We get bison from southern Indiana. We get some pork from Iowa. So really a lot of different areas
Yeah.
that we're pulling from.
Great. Great. So you have basically, at least in the U.S., you've got two lines. You have the Acana line and you have the Orijen line.
Yeah.
If you were going to do, your 30-second elevator speech on what's the difference between Orijen and Acana, and then we'll talk more in detail about each of those brands. But in essence, sort of what are the differences there?
So central to our food is, as I mentioned, biologically appropriate, and what that means is high meat inclusions. So as we look at our meat inclusions, we have a three-prong approach that we consider: how much meat, how much fresh meat, and how much meat variety. So those are the three things that we look at when we're addressing our meat inclusions. So if you apply that to our line, as you move up in our line, you're going to get more meat, more fresh meat, and more meat variety. Okay. So what's the difference between Orijen and Acana? Just that. It has the most meat of any of our foods. It has the most fresh meat and the most meat variety.
Okay, great. And to step back a little bit, back to talking about the kitchens, I think it's that meat inclusion, right, that is pretty unique, all the fresh meats that are going in. So that involved kind of creating some different mechanism in the kitchens to be able to prepare this food, right? So Had you invented some of your own equipment, or reutilize it for your purposes, or how?
Yeah, it's a very unique kitchen. The way it's laid out is much the way you would think about cooking in your own kitchen if you're baking, for instance, right?
Yeah.
If we were baking cookies here, we'd keep our wet ingredients separate from our dry ingredients. Right. So our kitchen is set up like that. Our refrigerated section is where our fresh regional fruits, vegetables, meats come into. Okay. It's a 25,000 square foot refrigerated section. That's where the mixing happens, right? And then the dry and the wet are combined for the first time in a premix chamber that sits above our extruders. Okay. Our extruders are custom built for us. When we built the Dog Star Kitchen, much the way if you were building a new house, you look at everything in your house that you wanted to improve, and you would do that with your next house. And that's exactly what we did with our Dog Star Kitchen. We had the best pet food kitchen in the world, we believe. And so if we were going to outdo that kitchen, we needed to look across the globe for the best equipment. And our extruders are a perfect example of that. We have a single screw extruder, which, extruders are like the Play-Doh kitchen where you put the Play-Doh in and cuts out the shapes. So we have a screw in there that as the food is fed in, the screw pushes it past the die plate and it cuts the little pieces of kibble. Right. When we make our Acana food, we have to run that extruder at about half the speed of its capacity. So we have to slow it down because of all that fresh meat. Right? Okay. Those machines or extruders are not designed for a lot of fresh meat. Most pet food is all powders. It's meat powder, fruit powder, vegetable powder. Those play very nicely in an extruder. Fresh meats, not so much. Right? Yeah. So in running an extruder takes a bit of skill. So we have very skilled guys that do that. And in some of our recipes, for instance, our Tundra, there's only a couple guys that we let run Tundra because of so much meat that's in that. It takes that skill level. Right. But so as you can imagine, if we're running that extruder at half speed for Acana, when it comes to make our Orijen cat food with a 90% meat inclusion, half speed would go down to, maybe a quarter, if that. So we actually built a custom extruder for that. It has two screws so that we can put more fresh meat in there. But even the makers of the extruder are amazed at how much fresh meat we can push through that. Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool. So that's another way that makes you kind of unique. And the fact that everything is never outsourced, right? So that's why you don't own your cannery. So you have no canned foods because you can't control that.
No, you don't want to design the best pet food, source the best ingredients, and then hand it to someone else to do that, even if you could do that.
Because we get that question sometimes about those options. So, okay, let's start getting into the food. So let's work with Orijen first. So let's see what we have. We have a couple different, I'll bring just a couple different examples. We've got Orijen Senior, there's Puppy, and then I brought kind of the unique fit and trim a little bit. So let's just talk a little bit about Orijen right now, and then we'll go in and sort of how we might, and what interesting thing, and we'll talk about this in some detail, is understanding the bags that Champion makes. They've done a lot of work over the years in developing packaging that really helps both you as the consumer and us as the retailer in communicating a consistent story, and Orijen has put a lot of information on the bags, more than I would venture to say almost anyone else in the industry. So it's very easy to see graphically what's in the food and how, and actually what goes into that food, so you can really make a good comparison. So they even go so far as, you know, showing the picture of the guy who's supplying the fish, for instance, so you know that that's where it's coming from, and this is the guy that's doing it. So kind of talk a little bit about that, and we'll flip the bag around and show you what it's all about.
So this is our new fit and trim in the Orijen line. So Orijen is our flagship line. It was created in 2006 as our pinnacle food. We had, you know, amazing foods with the Acana line, which actually was our first food, as we mentioned, but in the United States we launched with Orijen. So in the States sometimes people get it reversed, but Orijen was created after years of making Acana, going, you know, if we could create a food that had, you know, just only pinnacle health as our goal, what would we make? You know, what if we could make? Actually, Peter Reinhold's son came up with the Orijen, looking at his own dog Lucky, and just saying, you know, what would I make for Lucky? And that's where Orijen was born.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so, as you mentioned, we've always had a lot of information on our bags. It's our approach to being transparent about what is in the bag. Because, you know, as you know, in this industry, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And we wanted to be as upfront about what's in our food, because we feel that that's what truly differentiates. So we've always...
It's also important, like, what's not in the food.
Yeah.
As well,
So if you look at this bag right here, you'll see the 85-15-0. That's our Orijen food. It's 85% meat inclusions. 2/3 of that will be fresh or raw. So fresh means that the only source of preservation is refrigeration. So the only thing we did, if it's chicken, fresh chicken, it's got to go from farm to bowl in less than 5 days. Raw means the same thing, except we froze it. A lot of times we will freeze ingredients because of seasonality. For instance, on the back here you'll see Owen. Owen owns Norpel Fisheries off the coast of New Bedford, and he is our supplier of fresh saltwater fish. He is a sustainable fisherman, so he only fishes during peak season. So we're not going to get the same fish year round, but we want to make our food year round, so we'll freeze the fish.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's our definition of raw.
Okay.
So you can see that it's 85% meat inclusion. It's 15% fruits and vegetables. All of our foods are grain-free. They also are potato-free, tapioca-free, and they're also free of any plant protein concentrates. So our protein that's listed on the back of our bag is coming from animal sources, the best quality.
Which is key. So when we think of, when we're talking about protein at the shop, we'll talk about protein being what's the meat in the bag, not necessarily, because you can test, so food will test for higher protein, but it could be with plant-based, and that got us back into 2007 with the whole giant recall with the melamine in the bags, because that was an ingredient they could add in, and it increased the percentage of the protein, what looked like more protein in the bag, and that caused some of the issues. So at least here we're like, this is 85%, it is all meat. So we look at what is the meat content in our foods, and when we're talking about you, and that's something that we as a store want to stand behind as well. So it's an important differentiation when you start to compare ingredients bag to bag.
Yep. And so, like, you know, in our Orijen food, on average, about 95% of the protein is going to come directly from animal sources. We do use whole peas, we use whole lentils, so they'll contribute a little bit. That's why it's not 100%. Right. And as, you know, this 85 number goes up, this 15, you know, so if this goes down, this number goes up, right? So if you look at an Acana bag, it would a little more, maybe more like 85% is coming from animal sources, because there's a little more lentils and so forth in that bag. Gotcha. But yeah, this is how, you know, this is our front of the bag where we talk about that. We've got a few call outs down here. Biologically appropriate, you know, and that's really, we don't use the word grain-free. Our food is grain-free, but, you know, so is a bag of potatoes, right? Yeah. You know, so a dog's not looking for a bag of potatoes for his optimal health. He's looking for a meat-based diet. This food, as well as actually all three of these foods, are rendered free. So there's actually no meat meals of any kind.
Yeah, so
and no
means that, meal, so.
No chicken meal, no beef meal. It's all the meats in here are fresh, raw, or dehydrated. And we did that because we, so our extruders that we were talking about earlier, we cook at a lower temperature. 190 degrees is where we're cooking our foods. We do that. It's a steam infusion. just like if you're going to cook some steaks, they're more nutritious if you cook them medium rare, right? Than if you cook them well done.
Right.
So, we wanted to make sure that we're cooking at a low temperature to retain. If we're going to go all this trouble to get these great ingredients, you don't want to cook the goodness out, right?
Yeah.
So that's so we did go rendered free here.
Okay.
We do take a whole prey approach, so we use the entire animal. If an animal's going to die to be in our pet food, we want to make sure we use it all.
Yeah.
And so our ratio is about 70% meat, 20% organ, and 10% bone and cartilage.
Okay, and then what does that offer you now? Adding in doing a whole prey, because that's a newer addition, right, to your formulations.
It's been around for a little while, but a few years, yeah.
Yeah.
It's essential to us because it's the biologically appropriate way to address vitamins and minerals. In the wild, obviously, wolves are not taking multivitamins. What they're doing is they're eating the whole prey. They're eating everything of that rabbit, squirrel, or what have you. So we wanted to mimic that. So the result of our whole prey approach is fewer synthetics. I think, as you look at this food right here, it's got zinc protonate. Every other vitamin and mineral is coming from the food sources. Right. Even the chondroitin and the glucosamine, those are all coming from the bone and the cartilage.
And the benefit to that, not using the synthetics, is just that everything's that the vitamins and minerals are bioavailable to the dog or the cat, so they can more easily assimilate that. It kind of has like all the keys to the lock that they can unlock all those benefits because it has everything it needs to be able to digest that food.
Yep.
So always better getting those whole vitamins better than easier eating a vitamin or orange to get the vitamin C rather than just popping a synthetic
vitamin C tablet.
For
sure. So then freeze-dried, that's the FD, that's our freeze-dried infusions. We actually freeze-dry ingredients in-house because we make our freeze-dried foods and our freeze-dried treats in-house as well. But we will freeze-dry our palatant to put it on the food. So in the case of like our singles that are single protein, if it's a mackerel, we can't freeze-dry something else and put it in there. We actually have to freeze-dry mackerel.
Okay.
And we do that in-house. We'll freeze-dry those ingredients and then add them to our foods.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Instead of adding, because I know, a natural flavoring or animal digest, you'll see sometimes or things like that as palatants, but actually having real raws, you're going to get health benefits from that.
Yeah.
As well.
And that's put on at the end after the cook process. And then on the back, this is just another way to revisit those numbers on the front. So this we're looking at is a 4.5 pound bag with an 85% meat inclusion. So you got 3 3/4 pounds of meat in this bag.
So it's like going to the grocery store and buying 3 3/4 pounds of food and putting it in this bag. That's the difference. So when you look at this bag, it's like, wow, I just bought 1 3/4 pounds of chicken, and I bought a pound of turkey and a 1/4 pound of fish and a 1/4 pound of eggs and some flounder and some herring, and I put that in this bag. And so you're like, wow, that's full of meat. So all of that is in there. So that's how they can get to that 85%, as opposed to just maybe putting a whole, like a fresh meat as the first ingredient. There's moisture content. It's everything's fresh, so there's obviously moisture in that meat. When that moisture is taken out, then it kind of moves down in the ingredient panel.
Right.
So,
and that's why we take those 3-question approach to our meat inclusions: the how much, how fresh, and how many. So we do use dry meals. We use meals. So every animal that goes into Orijen or Acana is deemed fit for human consumption. So we're sourcing from the human chain. So if you're going to include it, that's going to be at that quality.
Excellent. Okay, so anything other fit and trim, just for the example, I think since we have it right in front of us, if you were going to, maybe, we're going to come back and revisit that because I want to talk a little bit about some health concerns that people might have.
Okay.
And we'll visit after we get a chance to talk about all our Acanas
Sure.
and things. So
Let's
keeping in the Orijen family, we'll talk a little bit about, as you said, introduce the cat.
Oh, yeah.
Right there for you. So that's Orijen cat, and then this is the Appalachian. This is the Acana version of cat food. So we'll talk about that as well. And then we have freeze-dried treats from them.
So our cat foods, same concepts. Cats, just like dogs, are carnivores. They are actually they're obligate carnivores. So they really must have the meat-based diet to thrive. So our Orijen cat food is our highest meat inclusion at 90%. It is also, we talk about meat inclusions and synthetics. This bag of food has The zinc proteinate is the only synthetic we have to add. We do source that ourselves locally, so we know where it comes from.
Right.
But a good, with cat food, people are always asking about taurine, right? And because of our meat inclusions being so high, we don't have to add taurine to our cat food. It's naturally occurring. Yep. So our Orijen cat food is our flagship. We also have Regional Red and Six Fish in the cat line, and then our Acana Regionals features our Acana version of cat food.
Okay.
So we have 4 Appalachian Ranch, we have the Wild Atlantic, and we have the Meadowlands and Grasslands.
Perfect. Great. So we do have those cat food options
and freeze-dried treats.
Freeze-dried, right? The freeze-dried treats which make a nice multi-protein treat, little snack for them.
Yeah, and I should probably mention this is our Tundra cat treat. We do have Tundra dog and cat food. Right. The Tundra foods are the only ones that we still make up in Canada. Okay. We do that because of Arctic char. We can't get that fresh in Kentucky because of where it's Arctic.
Maybe this year.
Although, I left Chicago this morning with snow on the ground, so there might have been some Arctic char in the lake. But it is the only food that we actually sell in the States that we still make in Canada. Arctic char is a great protein. I actually had some for dinner on Friday night. It's quite delicious.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Acana for dogs. So I've just got a couple of examples here.
Yeah.
We kind of walk through the Acana line real quickly, so we have that. I think that's everything. Yeah.
So there's
a couple examples. So.
For sure. So there's 3 lines in the Acana family. The third is we had the cat. So it's so we start with our entry level, which is our Heritage line. Heritage is a really successful food for us. It's feeds really well. It's our entry level into our foods. It's priced right. It's spec'd right. It's just great food. So this is the food of, let's say you were feeding a more commercial food, and you had some. I mean, really, this is how we all get here. Like I remember my first dog. Yeah. I was feeding the grocery store food, and I ran into a couple problems with my dog, and I start doing some research and talk to some friends, and I find, hey, there's a whole other world of dog food I can look at. Right. If that's the customer that we're talking to, this is the great starting point.
It's a great go-to food. So we transition a number of people who want to move up to fresher meats and a fresher food and a cleaner diet.
Yeah.
It's a great place to start. It transitions really well for dogs moving up to a higher quality, higher meat inclusion diet. And we've had a lot of success with that transition. So
it's a real home run food that feeds really well. One of my dogs at home eats this, and she does great on it. She's typically been a dog that's very sensitive. So she did well on this for a while.
Yeah, and it follows all the same
concepts.
Same concepts.
Yep.
So you still have that high meat inclusion. Very few, if any, synthetics. Still the whole prey diet. All of that. It just moves you right through. And then the differences are just the increase in the protein.
Yeah, you can kind of see it if we go like this. Yeah. We start at 50%, and then we go up to 60, and then this says 75 is this cat, but the dog would be 70. Right. As far as price points, it goes like this. The reason this one is a little more than this is because it's a single protein, and this is our line of singles. We have 4 of them. They're single protein. So like this bag, 4.5 pound bag of our Acana duck is 2.25 pounds of duck.
Yeah.
So, and
go
half
to the grocery store and buy 2.5 pounds of duck and put it in the bag, and you're there, and add some fruits and vegetables. And it's all duck. There's nothing. Truly they're single protein. So this is a great, we're all about food energetics, and that's a whole nother in the kitchen, session. But food energetics, basically we talk about foods that are hot, warm, neutral, cooling, and then cold, foods. And so from this energetic standpoint, duck is a cooling food, so great for dogs with allergies, active skin issues, things like that. You want to get them on a duck or a rabbit because it's naturally cooling. You don't want to put them on a hot food like a lamb or a venison, because that's like turning up the water on a boiling pot, turning up the heat on a boiling pot of water. You want to go with cooling foods, and it helps cool that dog from the inside out. It's a really clean, easy to digest diet. So we do real well. There's a pork, there's a fish, the mackerel, and the the duck.
So it's great, yeah, as you mentioned, dogs that maybe have skin allergies or food insensitivities or food sensitivities, or just people that like a rotational diet where they want to take a break each bag from whatever protein the dog had right before, so you can kind of just move through the line and start over again.
So you can, because we do encourage, and that's why we have our weight club program. You'll buy 10 bags, get one free. Obviously, these all of our Orijen and Acana brands are included. So the beauty of it is you can rotate through each of those formulas. All of the singles, or move from a singles to a heritage, or move to a, even a regional, depending on where your dog is. But the more variety you can give your dog or cat, the better it will be for their overall system. Because just like we don't eat the same thing every day, nor should our dogs, because our needs are different seasonally. We eat different in the summertime than we eat in the wintertime. What our body needs is just different. Our energy levels are different, things like that. So offering, and we don't always know exactly what our pets can't always tell us exactly what our bodies need. Sometimes we know, I really need a salad today, or I really, want to eat something specific. I need this, because your body's telling you this is what I need. Dogs and cats can't tell us that, so it's up to us to be able to offer that, rotational diet and giving them that option. So there's a lot to work through with the Acana line, and still like the same packaging, gives you all the details that you need. So.
Yep.
As well. So. And
then, the last one is our regionals, and that's our pinnacle food within the Acana line. It's got the most meat variety. The nice little story about regionals is when we launched Orijen in 2006, it was a 70-30 ratio, and that is now our Acana food. So just like computers, what used to be the top is now in line.
Yep. Perfect. So. Let's talk a little bit about, we're just going to revisit this fit and trim. It's one of the newer products and one of the more unique in the industry, really. It's a new take sort of on the keeping dogs fit and trim, but there's also some other great benefits to that. So talk a little bit about why fit and trim.
So as you are experienced with seeing lots of dogs and not wanting to upset anyone, there's a lot of overweight dogs and cats that we see. The food is love equation doesn't always benefit our little four-legged friends.
And just as a side note to that, what we like to look at with our dogs, just when we talk about weight control, if you take the back of your hand and you sort of rub and you kind of feel those bones in the back of your hand, that's basically what your dog should feel like, more or less. And look at them from the top down, and you should see a nice little curved, little hourglass kind of figure. And then if you're looking at them sideways, you see a nice little tucked in tummy, and that's what we're looking for weight management.
Yep.
So just to give you a point of reference, and leaner is always healthier. So.
Yep. Yeah. It's easier to put it on than it is to take it off.
And as our dogs get older, it's just like with humans. It's always harder.
So we, knowing that there was a lot of dogs and cats that needed help in this department, we wanted to look at it and see if we could do it in a biologically appropriate way. Right? So what we knew about the existing foods in this category is they weren't very effective. Most of them address fat, and they try to reduce fat. But if you reduce fat, you're also reducing meat. And if reducing meat, the other part of this 85-15 is the 15. And so if the 85 goes down, the 15 goes up. That 15 is where your carbohydrates are. So no one's going to lose weight with more carbs. Lots have tried.
Yeah, exactly. I know, it does not work.
It doesn't work. So we were thinking, how can we lower fat without raising carbs? And what we were able to do is we learned from our whole prey approach that organ meat is naturally lean. So high quality chicken liver, cod liver, turkey liver, these are naturally lean ingredients that are great protein sources. So by incorporating those into the fit and trim, we're actually able to lower our fat by 5%. So it is 13%, which is our lowest fat of any of our foods. But protein went from 38% actually up to 42%.
Okay.
As a result, carbs went down. So we have a food that has our lowest carbohydrate max.
What's that?
16%.
16%, which is great. We try to, as a goal, keeping our carbohydrates below 30%.
Yep.
Which is that's a minimum. Yeah. We like it lower than that. We'd rather have it in the 25s or lower in this case. Yeah.
So actually 30% is our max carbs of any food we make. Yeah. So our entry, the heritage or the singles would be at 30% max. Yeah. Our Orijen is at 20% max. Okay. You look at our regionals, it's 25. So we're in that range. And not only are our carbohydrates low, the quality of them is very high. They are low glycemic.
Yeah.
So
that's the key. If you are going to eat carbs,
make them slow carbs.
Slow carbs.
Yeah, your fast carbs, high sugar content, or like candy bars. They give you a big energy rush and then you crash. Right?
So those are like complex carbohydrates.
Yep.
Sort of things. Yeah.
So the glycemic load on our Orijen foods is less than 1.5. And the glycemic load on our Acana foods is less than 2.5. Yeah, and for reference, anything under 10 is considered low glycemic, so very low.
And that's we talk a lot. I mean, those of you who know us, we talk a lot about the glycemic index, lowering that glycemic index because that lowers the inflammation in the body. Our bodies work so much more efficiently if we can lower that. Lower the glycemic index. That just lowers the inflammation, which is going to help us with joint control and so many other issues that we have. A lot of it's just because of overabundance and inflammation in our bodies that we're not even aware of, but it's there. And
yeah.
It's there until you realize it's not there, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Fit and Trim. It's great, great take on a much needed category.
Great. So while we're talking about some of this, we get a lot of people coming in. We've addressed it a little bit, but dogs with skin issues and allergy issues. So where do you think they fit into?
Well, the singles line is a great. We already discussed that a little bit. By eliminating a lot of proteins, we're able to find a diet that works for a specific dog. That's why we have 4 different recipes for different protein intolerances. In general, though, allergies are related to the immune system. And the thresholds of what tips you over. A lot of times we're allergic to several things, but we don't see symptoms until a few of them conspire together to push us over the tipping point. So, my personal feeling is that anything we can do to achieve optimal health is going to strengthen that immune system and help us fight off any sort of issues. So, a biologically appropriate diet is the first step in that. If that's not doing it all, then maybe you go to the next step of finding a specific diet that works for your dog.
And working with the whole foods, we found that to be really helpful. So no fractionated grains, nothing like the wheat gluten, rice gluten, corn gluten, things like that. Also, sometimes synthetic vitamins, although it doesn't say that, my understanding is sometimes the synthetic vitamins are actually coated in a soy-based carrier, and that can cause issues. You'll never see it on the bag, but that could be an issue internally with some of the dog's processing. So sometimes it's not necessarily a food allergy as much as it is a food intolerance.
Yeah.
And then you're also struck with the issues of environmental allergies. So springtime, the fall. Now as the spring, we get a lot of grass allergies, things like that, pollen allergies that we have. And there's other ways that we can address that, but we're all about addressing from the inside out. So starting with the food, getting clean diet, and then there's other things we can add in. So perfect. Hey, before I forget, I want to say we have some great champion swag. So we'd love to have you guys ask questions live. We're here, so you can ask questions to Rich or myself, and we'll answer on air. One thing I did want to make sure that let's go back one more thing for health-wise. Dogs with like pancreatitis, we get a lot of digestive issues and things. So what do you recommend in your
low fat? So the Fit and Trim would be a good option. We're coming out with an Acana version called Light and Fit, and that would be another even lower fat. That's going to come in at 10% fat with a little lower protein. So that might work with some dogs better than Fit and Trim. But those are 2 great options for low fat diets.
Good. So we'd be remiss if we didn't address sort of what's been in the news lately.
Okay.
And that's there's a class action lawsuit with Champion. So can you kind of I know you can't go into a lot of detail, obviously it's an active case, but help us understand sort of what's going on and how we can, your take on it all.
Sure. So the suit was brought against us by individuals as class action suits, and it was surrounding heavy metals in our foods. We believe that suit, we reviewed the suit, it's without merit, it's pretty frivolous in our opinion. We look forward to our day in court if it gets to that point because we have the facts on our side. All of our foods are tested by third-party facilities that follow scientific testing procedures. We publish those results. You can go to our website and under our research, you can go to our white pages. It'll give you all kinds of details on our heavy metal testing. The NRC sets levels that are acceptable.
That's the national,
you keep putting me on the spot with it.
No, so, shoot. they're the ones who establish the
bar
standards, the bars for nutrition standards.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry it escapes me as well at the other NRC. So yeah,
that's live TV,
right?
It's live.
So, yeah. Right there.
But so the NRC sets the levels that are acceptable in pet food for heavy metals. Our foods have been tested by a third party, and those levels are well below the thresholds that the NRC sets. In addition, they're determined to be from natural sources. So we know that if you eat fish today, you're going to ingest some mercury. Right. You know, if you eat steak, everybody, it's in all foods. You know, that's just the nature of the ingredients. What's important is that you follow, you know, the guidelines and make sure you're making the safest pet food you can, which we do. We have been for over 30 years. You know, the food is completely safe. I feed it to my dog. I feed it to my family's dog. It's awesome.
And I think that also goes with the rotation. The more you rotate through, even rotating through the formulas, so you're going to get different fruits and vegetables, you're going to get different meat proteins, and it all comes from different places. You're going to balance that overall health over a period of time. So that's why we really don't recommend eating the same thing day after day after day. You can get systemic allergies from that as well, but you can also, you're just beholden on that particular ingredient set to be everything that your dog needs, and it may not be. So that's really key. But yeah, thanks for addressing that. Well,
sure.
There is a lot more information on the Champion, Acana, and Orijen Facebook pages. Like Rich said, on the website as well. It's something that we're following because we take this very seriously, obviously as a store company, and I know that Champion has as well.
Absolutely.
And so they have been very transparent from the beginning. So, okay. So, research. National Research Council.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was thinking it was. But okay, great. So, like I said, we have some swag. We can we'll answer any questions live if you have one for Rich or myself. And otherwise, I think we're just kind of wrapping up. But I appreciate.
Right. I have Marcy ask. She says, "How does one buy this product out of state?"
You could go to our website, and we partner with Independent Pet Specialty. So I would say, grab a bag from Four Muddy Paws on your way out of town, and then when you get to where you're going, get on our website, punch in your zip code, and food will be there. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Barbara asked, "Is the Orijen Tundra going to continue to be available in the U.S. and imported from Canada?"
Yes.
Yes, that is key. That is the only food, right?
That is the only food.
Made, and we're still getting it. It is on an allocation basis, but the supply's been pretty good lately. So we've been able to maintain that in store as well. So yes.
That's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rich. It's been great.
My pleasure.
I appreciate
Thanks, Jeff.
it. Thanks everyone who tuned in. This will also be posted. Obviously, it'll live on Facebook. It'll be on our website. It's going to be posted to our YouTube channel, Four Muddy Paws. So all of our In the Kitchen events will be there for you to reference later, share with your friends. I appreciate you taking the time and watching this, either live or recorded. And that's what we're all about at Four Muddy Paws, is trying to get to meet the players in our industry. The guys who are, women who are really making it happen, and giving you the information, the tools you need to have your pets and your dogs and cats enjoy a long, healthy life together. We're really, truly passionate about the health and well-being of your dogs and cats, and this is just one example of what we can bring you and what we can offer you. So thanks so much. Have a great night, and we'll see you all at the shops.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.